Okay. All right then, so we're on time. Kathy, you
Yes,
ready?
we're on.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. Today is Thursday, November 21st, 2019. The time is exactly 9 a.m. Calling this meeting to order. And I'm going to ask Zach to please lead us in the pledge.
Stand. Begin. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay then. So do we have any potential conflicts of interest?
Nope.
We do not.
Nope, not here.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to move on to the first item. And I should point out that attending are Commissioners Duncan. Commissioner Brooks is by phone, recovering from a medical procedure, and I'm Commissioner Filio, so we're all in attendance this morning. So the first item is a public hearing with a potential action item, and it's resolution number 2019-89, Community Development Fee Schedule. And this is the current fee schedule, which was adopted via Resolution 2019-35, enacted on April 25th of 2019. So I will ask Director Callahan to lead us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. This really is just a housekeeping measure to add on 4 things that are currently not in the resolution passed in April. And I'll just go through them each quickly. On relocations under the fee type, that's a short version of the new provision you may recall was set in Omnibus 3.
Right.
It's the sort of thing we have to have, otherwise we have no way to recoup our time. And we believe that the number you see there is reasonably accurate of the time that planners would spend processing this sort of amendment, or change rather. I'll gloss over the pre-application part and come back to it because this is the one that probably takes the most dialogue. The next two, publication of public notice and notice of adoption, we are suggesting that rather than have a hard number, that we pass the cost through because it varies. It can be as low as $38 and as high as $80, depends on the circumstances.
Okay.
And I don't frankly know why we haven't come up with this idea 20 years ago. We ought to just pass through the real cost.
Okay.
Okay.
So back to the pre-application meetings, this is actually an idea that the current planners brought to my attention. I've used it before in other jurisdictions. But to be clear, the idea is that we would recoup $100 for the time spent on the pre-application meetings we do that are mandatory for things like variances, subdivisions, whether it's major or minor, the rezonings, the variances, all the things that come to you in public hearings that the planners have to meet with someone on in order for the applicant to understand the minimum things that are required in order to have a complete application. These meetings take a lot of time. The staff will routinely spend anywhere from an hour to 4 hours just getting prepared for it.
Okay.
Because there's research, there's maps, there's background, there's history. And then the actual meeting itself can be anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour. So we just wanted to basically have a dialogue with you. Does it make sense to you to recapture some of that investment in our time?
Okay.
And so really even at $100, it's not going to cover all the time that our planners spent.
Probably not all the time, but it's a lot better than where we've been. Which
Sure.
is not getting any of it
Right.
now.
And if
Okay.
somebody just had a question, like they were thinking about doing a bed and breakfast or thinking about a zone change or splitting their property, this would not apply to them because they'd be able to still come in and
Thank you.
ask
It
questions.
would not, because we have front counter planners that their job is expressly to meet with people, have that sort of dialogue. That's not what this is about. This is for the meetings where we're gonna do a variance or a subdivision or a rezoning or what have you.
Okay.
And sometimes you conduct pre-screening over the phone as well. Well, and it's an
sometimes we
initial
have both
application. Yeah.
dialogues
And
and where we wouldn't charge, and on rare occasion, people live in, I'm making this up, New York, and sometimes it's easier for us to do it over the phone. But in today's world of technology, it's possible.
okay. But I'm saying when you get the initial inquiry, that's probably coming, if there are questions up front as to what the procedure is, that could be handled probably telephonically.
And outside of the $100 fee.
And outside of the
That's
$100 fee, that's what I'm getting
That's
at,
part of
okay.
what we do as a public
Okay.
service.
Right, right. So the difference is, hey, I'm thinking about doing this, I need to know, can I do
What's
it?
my, yeah,
And then versus, I know that I need a
I'm
C.
ready to do a project.
Yep, I'm
Correct,
ready to
okay.
do a CUP variance zoning change, and then that's when the pre-application process happens and the new $100
Exactly.
fee if it's adopted.
Exactly.
Okay?
okay. And, go ahead, David.
That's it.
Relocations, can you explain that?
Sure. We have subdivisions, for instance, date back to when I was born. People want to change it, want to move the boundary lines or the in and out, or meaning the road configuration, or change the easements, or all of those things. And right now, we don't, well, up until Omnibus 3, we didn't have a way to handle that in a quick and a useful, expedient way. Now we do. That's the relocation part of the road or the property lines or what have you. And so we just need to have a fee set for it.
Okay.
Okay.
So in that way, it's not really different from a major or minor subdivision. It's just that it's a different kind of thing like that, and it takes different, lesser amounts of time.
Okay. So essentially,
Understood.
these fees take the burden off the taxpayer and put it onto the people who are actually doing the,
That's a good way to put it.
And in
Doing-
that way, it's like the rest of our fee schedule that you approved in April, where there's 11 pages of things that are exactly what you just said.
okay. All right.
Okay,
So
so
my
why don't we
questions.
move on with comments? Let's start with Tim Casting. How are you?
Good, thank you.
You're indicating as neutral. Do you wish to speak, Tim?
Not at this point.
Okay. Thank you for attending, by the way.
You're welcome, thank you.
Jeff Tyler, opposed. Do you wish to speak?
Good morning, Jason.
Go right ahead.
Leslie.
Good morning.
Nice to see you guys. Beautiful day. Yeah, I'm Jeff Tyler, and you need my address or anything?
Sure, please.
92 Harbor Drive, Kootenai. Live in the county, and I'm also, you guys know me as part of NWPOA. And I just want to be on record from NWPOA as stating that we're kind of against any more new fees, mostly because we're upset about the 3% full tax increase on all the property taxpayers, especially in this time when there's so much more new revenue with all the growth that we're having. I know it's easy to say, growth needs to pay for itself. It's kind of an easy way, I think, for government to tax people more. But I must admit, I have been in the construction industry, and I'm retired now. And I know I paid a large share to the government whenever I got permits and things. And what that does is increases the cost of the house for the people. And it's a big complaint right now that housing is so expensive. So every time we have a new fee on a builder or developer, that gets passed along to the person buying the house. And we are in a capitalist system to where competition will help keep the prices down. So, so I know that, it seems like developers, do make an excessive amount sometimes, but on the other hand, we had a bad economy and a lot of developers went bust. So it's a risky business, and so to keep putting the onus on developers gets to a point where it's really not fair. Like I said, I think they probably pay a reasonable amount as it is, from my experience as a builder. I just wanted to go on record and say that any new fees NWPOA is going to be opposed to. We would like to say that we were, some of this is a spending problem. I like the new parking lot, it's great. And I think from the beginning, putting that big giant swale in the middle was a mistake. That could have maybe been not done that way. But I have to agree with Bill Brooks that spending $300,000 for 11 spaces when the workers here aren't parking across the street, I think is an example of, are they making that up through charging more fees to builders or whoever? So that's all I had to say. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'll just point out that it was also a safety issue that we went ahead and approved that because you couldn't get two cars, one coming in, one coming out at the same time. And so we moved the approach and enlarged the approach. So
Oh,
it
no,
wasn't
that's
just
great.
getting,
Yeah, it's really nice
Yeah.
now. Yeah.
yeah.
And adding to that, we actually saved about $100,000, so the 300 is now closer to 200. We, as Leslie pointed out, we moved the approach, we cleared up the potholes, we widened the lanes. The 11 spaces are actually incidental to the whole project, so we did pick up a little bit of space, and the claim that 40% of the employees are parking is, to me, unfounded. I don't know that. I don't know if it's 10% or 60%, but I certainly doubt that number. But in any case, that's where we're at with that.
Right. So back to the issue at
Sure,
hand.
let's go back
Sorry,
to this.
that's a little tangent. So what I hear more often than not is people complaining that growth is not paying for itself. And so to have services offered that the public is subsidizing, you know, if I never split my property, if I never have a CUP, if I never do all that, but yet I'm paying so other people in the county can do that, I'm not sure how I feel about that. So this, I totally understand about the whole fee thing, and this is just one way that we can say, okay, the user is going to pay for it, not just the thing, you know, not just the public, if that makes sense.
And I understand that position.
Yeah, and I agree, there's a lot of things to cut in the county, and I am really looking forward to the next budget cycle. So hopefully we won't have a 3% raise next year, that we can use our new growth and pay for what the county needs. So.
Okay. Bill, do you have any comments, or should I, we don't have any more requests. Does anybody else wish to speak, by the way? We only have 2 guests, so I guess not. So what I'll do is entertain a motion to end public testimony and enter into deliberations.
Bill, are you good with that? Do you have any questions or anything?
No, I don't.
Oh.
I agree with what both commissioners have said.
Okay, I move that we exit public testimony and enter into deliberations, or end public testimony.
I second the motion.
Bill Brooks,
Aye.
Commissioner Duncan,
Aye.
Chairman Philios.
Aye. And so we're entering into deliberations. Thoughts? Bill, you haven't spoken yet. Do you want to go?
No, I'm just enjoying listening to a good conversation, but go ahead, I'm fine.
Leslie?
I think these fees are reasonable. I too don't necessarily like more fees, but what I have realized working here is that taxpayers are even subsidizing for driver's licenses. So the money we pay for driver's licenses, that's actually taxpayer subsidized. Our fee doesn't even go to cover the cost. Now, can we do things to reduce that cost? I'm all for that. But it's opened my eyes being here and realizing so many people keep complaining that growth isn't paying for himself. Well, it's because the fees are not attached to it. The whole county is paying for developers and other things like that. And, you know, I'm always looking for ways to be more efficient, and I think Director Callahan has done fairly well with what he has to work with, and short staff, and unprecedented, in the last 2 years for sure, last 3 years, you guys have exponential planning applications and growth. And so I appreciate the work you guys have done. And I appreciate that you're willing to work with me and seeing where else we can make cuts. So I think at this point, I'm fine with the 2 fees. If it becomes a problem, I'm willing to look at, you know, maybe
Can always revisit.
revisit it. I'm actually excited about the actual cost for the publications, because people could actually be saving money. If it only costs $38, but we're charging $45, that's not, I don't think that's a good idea. So I'm kind of happy about that one. And I guess that's all I have to say.
Okay. Yeah, so I would agree pretty much with what Commissioner Duncan has said. And it's interesting when we look at the question of growth and why doesn't it pay for itself. this is why we're doing our best to stimulate commercial growth so that we can spread the tax base over the business community as well as the residential user. The claim has often been made, even though I don't know that there are any official studies to this effect, that residential growth does not pay for itself. I don't know that I've ever seen that conclusively, but I think there's good reason to believe that that's the case. So we do try, and once again, for the third year, we've maintained the funding to Jobs Plus. There is a corporation that's going to be moving in shortly. They've already purchased the land. 100 jobs are coming in. There's another associated, almost household name that's going to be moving part of their operation in. So if we can spread the load across the commercial base, and it's going to ease the burden on the individual taxpayer. And I do like the fee structure as well, because it's pretty much pay as you go and pay for what it costs us, and I suspect it's still going to be somewhat less than our actual cost. So once again, easing the burden on the taxpayer. As far as, you know, the 3% tax increase, I have to look at that in the context of the demands that came before us from the various departments, and many of those largely due to the growth. So when we passed the budget, the proposals that came before us, just to briefly revisit it, were something like $19 million over last year. And we had to keep that down to our maximum, which was $2.7 million that was taxable. So I think we did a good job of containing it. There's going to be, as long as the growth is there, the demands are going to be there, and we try to operate as efficiently as we can. I should also point out that the operating budget for the county was reduced by 3% this year. And the tax rate is actually dropping from 28 per 100,000 to 24 per 100,000. The reason for the increases that the people are seeing is largely due to the massive increase in valuations. That's the situation that we're confronted with. But once again, I have to point out that folks need to look at that top line on the tax bill, because that's county. That's what we control. When you get into the other taxing districts, schools, libraries, fire, highway districts, we have no control. We collect for that, but we don't control that. We only control the top line, which is typically running on average about 25% of the total tax bill. So anyway, not to run tangentially, I also agree with these fees, and I think Director Callahan has given fair justification. So if there are no further points, motion?
I move that we approve resolution number 2019-89, which is the new community development fee schedule.
I second the motion.
Bill Brooks,
Aye.
Commissioner Duncan,
Aye.
Chairman Philios.
Aye, and so resolution 2019-89 for the community development fee schedule is approved. And let the record show that at 9:02 a.m., Deputy Civil Prosecuting Attorney Pat Braden joined us. Okay, so that concludes
The hearing.
the public hearing segment of our meeting. And so now we move on to signings for decisions already made.
Bill, would you like to authorize community development to use your stamp for the signings?
Yes, I already sent an email to Chandler this morning.
Perfect, thank you. All right, are we ready to
Okay,
go ahead?
Kathy, ready?
Yes.
Okay, so we're moving on to the signing segment. The first one is resolution, this is item A, resolution number 2019-89, which is actually today's community development fee schedule. So is there a motion to execute the order of decision?
I move that, sorry.
Execute the resolution.
Or execute the resolution, forgive me.
I move that we execute the resolution, resolution number 2019-89.
I second the motion.
Bill Brooks,
Aye.
Commissioner Duncan,
Aye.
Chairman Philios.
Aye, motion carried. So we'll move on to item B, which is case number CUP, which is a conditional use permit, 19-0005 Windmill Storage. It was a request by Todd Hughes for a conditional use permit for mini storage and rental warehouse on a 10-acre parcel located approximately 600 feet northwest of the intersection, oh my goodness, of North Daisy Lane and Prairie Avenue in the agricultural zone. Go right ahead.
I move that we execute the order of decision for case number CUP 19-0005.
I second the motion.
Bill Brooks,
Aye.
Commissioner Duncan,
Aye.
Chairman Philios,
Aye, motion carried. Item number C, case number MSP 19-0004, Lone Mountain Estates, 4th edition. A request by JT Holdings LLC for preliminary approval of a two-phase major subdivision consisting of 40 residential lots on an approximately 211-acre parcel in the rural zone. Motion?
I move that we execute the order of decision for case number MSP 19-0004.
I second the motion.
Bill Brooks,
Aye.
Commissioner Duncan,
Aye.
Chairman Philios,
Aye, motion carried. Item D, case number PUD 19-0002, Black Rock PUD Amendment, or PUD Amendment, a request by Archstone LLC for final application to amend the Black Rock Plan Unit Development to increase the approved dwelling units from 376 to 389 for a total of 13 additional dwelling units. Motion?
I move that we execute the order of decision for case number PUD 19-0002.
I second the motion.
Bill Brooks,
Aye.
Commissioner Duncan,
Aye.
Chairman Philios,
Aye, motion carried, and that concludes the signing section of our agenda this morning. So we'll be executing these before we move on to,
the resolution,
yeah.
the CUP. Subdivision. And the PUD.
4 different types of matters for some.
Yes, there are.
Okay, one,
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Sandy?
Ready.
Okay. Okay, so we're moving on to item 7, which is the business segment of our meeting, community development update. First item, discussion of the timing for board public hearing venues. Discussion item. Director Callahan.
Commissioners, I thought you might appreciate a dialogue about how we set times for, and days for public hearings. It has in the past been the chair's prerogative of how we do these things. Chris has mentioned to me in the last, like when you first became chair with this board, that you like the idea of going with a 2 o'clock meeting for uncontroversial items. And then we take the discretion of deciding if it's uncontroversial or not. We meaning the staff, I mean, for Bill's sake. And as a general rule, we have a pretty good idea because we've heard it at a hearing examiner in most cases, in some few cases, if it's ordinance or comp plan update, I mean by ordinance, if it's comp plan or proposed changes to the development code, which ends up in an ordinance, then the planning commission weighs in. But either way, we have a good idea of how many people are gonna show up at a public hearing. So we use that knowledge to set what we think is a reasonable day and time for hearings. But we can do it differently. It's a board decision. I just wanted to get it out there for, here's how we do business, and then the 3 of you can tell me what you think you'd like to do.
Thoughts?
I liked doing the 2 o'clock, or I prefer maybe to do it 3 or 4 o'clock, because we had quite the span of time on the last one. But I liked starting it early, so especially in the winter, so people who don't want to drive at night can come, say their piece, and then continue it to 6 o'clock, so people who are working can then come. I'm even willing to do it 9 a.m. and then continue it till 6 p.m. You know, if we wanted to do a morning, do a regular community development morning, and do that as well. I think what happened is you guys made that decision for the comp plan because you had all that public input, but I think that it's so important to the public that the optics looked bad to have it earlier, which, you know, I understand because I've been to night meetings where nobody shows up.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like, well, we're so busy during the day, you know, 25 meetings a week sometimes, which is, you know, just about our max, that adding another night meeting is difficult. But for things like that, I want to have them at night. And, you know, we scheduled the deliberations for nights. The deliberations we can't actually split, you know, which I understand. So that's just a night meeting. But I think anything to do with the land use code, that's gonna be an ordinance, anything, even if we think that it's not controversial, I probably wanna have those things at night or one of those split, areas where we just say, okay, you know, we're gonna do it twice. So, I think it's gonna be a challenge for your staff because now you're looking into overtime and that kind of thing. And I don't wanna burden the taxpayers, but I wanna make sure that the taxpayers are heard, that citizens have their say. So, Wednesdays are bad for me in general, but we don't need to change everything for me. So, I mean, I would like to see it on maybe the first Thursday of the month, that evening, but.
That conflicts with our hearing examiner.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you can't do the fourth Thursday either, cause that's planning commission, so we'll just, keep it on Wednesdays and that's fine with me.
Bill, thoughts?
No, I have no problem with the, split hearings. I do have a problem when we have a very small number of people attend, one, and then we have another with another small number of people. Using that logic, we should have, maybe a Saturday meeting too, because there might be other people who couldn't attend on Wednesdays or whatever day this hearing was scheduled. I think we have to keep it consistent, more importantly than when, it's already scheduled where, but I think it should be publicized as widely as possible in advance as much as possible. And I would leave that to, the administrative people to handle. So I'm comfortable the way things are now, but, I don't wanna be costing the taxpayers a lot of money for a small minority of people who are extremely vocal and exercised about particular land use planning issues.
Okay, so then are we, how do I put this? Are we generally in agreement with what Director Callahan has mentioned? Which is depending on the nature of the issue, they can determine whether it should be single or 2 meetings on the particular day. Are you comfortable with
I am.
that, Leslie?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay, David, you're
We can
okay?
deal with that.
Okay, that's good, thank you. So moving on to item B, the public's expectation of county land use regulator or regulatory authority. David?
You should know, we hear extreme viewpoints, but we also hear just viewpoints that are not extreme, but that the public is surprised that we don't have more authority. I'll give you an example. I have talked with a man who had moved here from California, could not believe that our site disturbance program doesn't require someone to take new spoils of land that have been located on their property, smooth them out and grade them and seed it. I have workplaces where that is a requirement. Our regulations don't necessarily require it. This was one of those cases. He was aghast. We spent a lot of time just explaining to this man that our regulations say this. And where I'm going with this is that we get it from the other side too. And I dare say staff time in any given week is as much as 20% just talking with people to get them to understand where we are. And they are very different, divergent viewpoints, oftentimes from the opposite ends of the spectrum.
I see your staff nodding, by the way, go ahead.
I can just imagine. Because if I hear it, I know where it starts from. And so some of that is a reflection of the people moving here. You know, we get people from Texas, Colorado, Arizona, California, to name the big states. And all of those states have very different regulations than we do, especially Colorado and California. very much more environmentally oriented. And those are the people
You
that
could have Washington as well.
well, thank you. And
Yeah,
the
you
same
could-
thing,
yeah.
much more environmentally, in fact, they require, like California does, an environmental impact statement.
EAS.
That we don't do in Idaho on any level that I know of.
Yeah, we don't have a state environmental protection act like Washington,
Mhm.
California, and other states do.
Thank you. So I just wanted you to be aware, it creates an interesting but sometimes difficult set of circumstances for the staff to deal with. And we are always looking for that sort of modest, reasonable ground to help people understand what we can do. And it takes time.
So,
So just an informational item,
oh,
just wanted you
okay,
to be aware.
okay. So is there any mechanism for, well, I don't know, I don't want to drag it out, but is there any mechanism where we can hold a forum of some sort for general discussion where these items can be played out? Some of it is
Sure.
philosophical, clearly,
Right.
and then some of it is practical. Your
Yeah,
thoughts?
of course. We probably ought to just stew on it a little.
Okay,
bit.
yeah,
Think
we should. You're right about
What's the
that.
best venue, what
Yes.
time of day, who should we invite?
Also, something that other nearby places have done, including the city of Kootenai, to some level of success, is having online surveys where people can, maybe.
That's a good point,
maybe
too.
we can reach more people
Right,
than
right, right.
would attend like, a town hall meeting like we're
Right.
talking about. Although I think the town hall meeting is a good idea too.
And I think maybe even videos based on real-life calls and questions. Just, a quick 3-minute, hey, I got this call today. Other people might have the same question. We don't do this because, or we do this
A
because.
frequently asked questions
Yeah.
video.
Yeah, frequently asked questions
Well,
video.
And it's interesting, this discussion's always fascinating because, occasionally, and more than occasionally, we encounter individuals who say, man, I just don't want any more regulation. Oh, but I got a problem with my neighbor. Oh, so your neighbor's a slob, but you don't want regulation. And in fact, you mediated a case like this recently, and I won't mention names, but it was up in the Rathdrum area. And actually, that actually even posed a health hazard because of the tires and rodents and whatnot. But what's interesting is the individual, the complainant, the neighbor, the good neighbor, is basically somewhat anti-regulation. But when the problem was next door, well, how could you handle that without some level of regulation? And so there's always two sides to this issue, and it's a very complex one. I think we're gifted in a sense, David. You're gifted. We're somewhat blessed because you've done this in 2 other states. In Colorado, which is probably very protective, very environmentally conscious, but then you've also done the job in Texas,
Not so much.
which not so much, right? So I think you bring the balance that we need. These are always tough issues, because we try to uphold the notion of property rights, but is any right truly absolute? Because there is an impact to other folks. We had a case, and I'm mentioning this for the benefit of our guests, on Coeur d'Alene Lake Drive, if you recall, where there was a structure there. There were a lot of, shall we say, not even outbuildings, but RVs and whatnot, and the neighbors in the area, some of whom are living in higher valued properties, were complaining. And so we had to deal with that issue. So are we gonna protect their value, or do we protect the individual's property right? And so these are the balances. So you're right, this is a key discussion item. And it'll be with us for a long time. Okay? Let's move on. Item C, conflicts with mechanical permits and LOC, which is the location permit, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Brought about by the opt-out.
The opt-out
Yes.
program.
Take it away.
Again, just wanted you to be aware, one of the weird things we bumped into when we inherited mechanical permits back from the state after the opt-out program was eliminated is presumably what the state was wrestling with when we had the location opt-out in play, which is people are constructing their home opted out, not realizing that they have to leave things open in order for the state, if it was then, the state inspectors come in and look at the mechanical equipment, which you may not know, HVAC.
The HVAC, yeah.
Okay. And now we've taken it over, now my inspectors are bumping into the same problem where people have covered up with drywall, name it. And the staff said, well, what do I do with this? Because I can't actually see what needs to be seen in order to know that it meets code. It hadn't become a nightmare yet, I expect it to. It's because it's inevitable, frankly.
Right.
At that point, we will probably be asking the person to take out some drywall so we can see what's going on. Or you can imagine they've actually built a wall and other things that, not just the drywall.
Right.
And so again, I just wanted you to be aware, pick a variation, there can be hundreds of variations on a theme on this sort of thing. It's just, again, in my view, one of the unforeseen consequences of the opt-out program, because you can't predict human
Right.
activity.
Except you could have predicted some of this based on Coeur d'Alene Press articles, which just said, so free for all, you don't need any inspections. Instead of, no, state inspections are still required. So, there was a lot of misinformation, I think, spread, and so this is not really surprising to me. Going forward, I mean, it's state law. The state law was never in question.
Right.
And so, I mean, our hands are kind of tied. I mean, we follow state law or we are subject to.
And what about electrical? Is that in there too?
John,
Because mechanical and electrical are state mandated,
Yep, and
state
plumbing.
mandated. And
That's
plumbing.
true, but the state handles the electrical side.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Mhm.
okay.
This is John Mills, building official.
Mm-hmm.
To kind of give a little bit more background as far as why we would want somebody to expose something when the argument, well, you can go up in the attic and look at it. Crawling through a dark attic is very hazardous, not only for the individual inspector, but also the potential to damage
Right.
the construction. And in that respect, I don't want my inspectors crawling through a dark attic unless there's absolutely no way around it. We did have one inspector, the situation, the ceiling was in, the ductwork had not been inspected. He spent almost 2 hours crawling through the attic to do the inspection on an already busy day. This is why we're looking at having them expose some things that already been covered up and will create complaints that would probably come directly to you people.
Right. How many are we looking at now? Are we still looking at about 600 to 800 that are open, or how many do you think are still?
The 600 to 800 LOCs open, yes. As far at this point with this particular circumstance, probably a half a dozen.
Okay.
It doesn't happen a lot, but when it does happen, it creates significant issues.
Sure. So is there a way to contact these people? Brief email, hey, don't forget, you better leave this open because we need to inspect it. I mean,
One thing that I've added to the people doing the mechanical plan review on these LOC permits is when they approve the mechanical documents, right up on the top of it, all related mechanical equipment must remain open for inspection.
okay.
The biggest problem as far as forewarning is we don't know what's gonna happen until it's there.
Right.
Ran into one yesterday where he's applied, but the concrete for the radiant heating system's already been poured. We have not inspected the radiant tubing. We'll find a way around that, but that's an example of what we're looking at.
Right.
So increased time equals increased cost.
Correct.
Okay, this is fascinating. No, go right ahead,
And to
David.
some extent, it is unpredictable because out of that 800 number you mentioned, we don't know how many of these are started or are not going to start and are going to start 2 years from now.
Right.
Or what have you. I mean, we have some ideas when I work with the assessor's office who have also we've contacted, but it's just an ongoing problem. Because it's to some extent impossible to nail down people that decided they're not gonna do this for years.
Right.
To opt out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think that whatever the press might have written about the opt-out was necessarily the cause. I think what happened is, as careful as we tried to be with regard to the recorded instrument on the opt-out and whatever might have been written about what it is and what it wasn't, there's still a great degree of misinterpretation by the public. And the most recent case that we have lived through was someone who's actually my auto mechanic, and he came to me one day and he was screaming. He was in a panic. He said, "I don't want to go to jail." I said, "What are you talking about?" And we basically put a stop order because he his builder moved a shop to his new location and located it in a floodplain. And he said, "But I opted out." I said, "But you didn't opt out of the location. You opted out of the building code." Well, whose fault is that? Somebody did, and he was upset with me, and I said, "I'm sorry, but your problem is with your builder because he didn't play by the rules." Now you say, "Well, can you forgive it?" Well, we're not going to sue the man, we're not going to prosecute him, but the fact of the matter is, if we were to grant him an exception, as David explained to me, that now potentially affects our certification rating for insurance purposes. And if that rating degrades when the state conducts their inspection, or is it FEMA, David? You want to explain?
CRS, the
CRS.
community rating system, but that's really, to me, the minor part of this.
Go ahead.
Having a livable structure in the floodplain is unacceptable when it doesn't meet floodplain regulations.
Correct.
You put people's lives in harm's way.
Right.
That's the part that, to me, can't be forgiven.
Most important.
We're not gonna put anybody in jail, we're not gonna act on
Right,
it,
right,
but
right,
again, we can't excuse it,
Mm-hmm. Fair enough.
okay?
Yeah. So anyway, there's a series of things that arise when things like this happen. Anyway, anything else? Bill, you want to jump in?
No, I appreciate, what planning has done here, and especially John Mills' explanation that really, brings home some of the practical problems that the inspectors deal with.
Okay. All right then. So I think we're done with this, and I'm going to call for public comment. Tim, Jeff, would you care to comment?
I'm good. Thank you, Commissioners, for all the work that you do.
You're very welcome.
Norma, anything? Okay.
I'm sorry, I failed to acknowledge you.
Oh, that's okay. Not a problem.
Are we okay then?
I'd like to.
Go right ahead,
say-
Jeff.
I'd like to mention on the meeting times, I do understand the time it takes, and you know, even with my group, we don't know who's gonna show up or not. We know there's people that have an interest, but whether they're gonna show up or not. So I understand that frustration and all of your time, and we realize all the hours that you work as commissioners. It's I think it's gonna be a problem, the amount of hours you guys have to work, you know. I think many people don't wanna run for commissioner just because of the long days that you guys have. I wanted to also comment on the land use, well, with the opt-out transition, I think some of that we're gonna have to kind of accept as being grandfathered, and let some of that go. I don't think it's gonna be a large enough number to affect any of the some of these things you're worried about. And if the one thing was a shop in a floodplain, that's not really a habitable place anyway. That's maybe gonna just be cars and equipment. You can even mention to them, you know, okay, I see you shaking his head, but also I know I've built things in floodplain, and I've followed all the rules over the years. And garages, if you put the vents in the side for the water to flow through or something, then maybe there's fixes that somebody can do, you know, to help alleviate some of that problem without having to tear a building down or be afraid to go to jail or something. The other comment, I did want to make a comment, but I forgot exactly what that conversation was about the land use regulatory
Yes.
authority.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll just have to let that go for now.
Was it a property rights thing, or?
Yeah, it was a, but it's, I'm just, OLD is affecting me right now.
Yeah. Well, and I think that people are used to the way things are, and they don't really understand what makes our area different. And so it's,
Thank you. That's what I was saying. There was a mention of people moving here from Washington and Colorado and California. Idahoans that I meet do not want to be like California and Washington and Colorado. So I think, it's important for people that work for the county to remember that we're different here in Idaho. We don't want to be like those states. We want to have a little more freedom-minded. So I would wish that there'd be an error towards that.
Absolutely. Yes, sir. Tim, please.
And I would echo those sentiments. Idaho is a desirable place to move to. And one of the things that I think is desirable is a little bit more freedom as far as regulation and so on. And so if we were going to err, even though that people moving in from the outside from other states where they are used to more regulations and so on, and Commissioner Filios, I understand the illustration that you're talking about is a neighbor, property rights versus a neighbor issue, and that will always be there. That was the same thing that Commissioner Green mentioned many times. That conflict will always be there. But I believe that the nature and the spirit of Idaho, that it's always best to try to err on, if you will, the personal responsibility and liberty and less regulation.
Norma, did you want to jump in?
I would say I agree with what these two gentlemen have said. As regards having a neighbor who has a pigsty on his property, I have one of those. I built a fence. I didn't, call somebody and say, you've got to do something about this. And so, yeah, that's where I stand on it too. Because I have a particular thing that came to mind this morning on the way down here, because, I do have this neighbor who has all this junk. I mean, he's a plumber and he brings stuff home. He just throws it around in the yard, and he has his commercial truck, and I can see it over the fence, and he parks his backhoe close to the fence and whatever. I'm not allowed to build a fence high enough to hide all of his junk because of regulations. And yet, I would have to get a conditional use permit if I wanted to bring, like, say one of those storage buildings. I didn't want to put all the money and the time and the effort into building a storage building. I could use one of those.
Cargo containers.
Cargo containers, thank you. But I have to have a conditional use permit for that. I have 35 acres. Because my neighbors might be offended by it, and yet I have neighbors that have a junkyard. I have other neighbors that don't cut their trees down when they're damaged and they fall on my fence and damage it. And then I have neighbors that hate us because we have an easement. And, because, we've had little problems with this neighbor with the junkyard. And on the other side, we have a driveway, we have an easement. And a neighbor called my husband earlier this year and said, I'm planning to buy some gravel for that driveway. And my husband said, great, I'll spread it around for you with my tractor. Well, now those people won't talk to us. We think that they wanted us to offer to help pay for the gravel. But we don't really use that driveway, they do. So they're putting all this wear and tear on our driveway because there's an easement there. And they want us to pay for their damage that they're doing to our road. And so they're not talking to us anymore. So suppose I wanted to get one of these units, and I have to notify these people that have animosity toward us. And they complain, and I'm not able to get my conditional use permit or my cargo unit. So I have problems with that, and that goes along with this situation here, I think. And not to mention, I would have to pay how much money now for, to notify those people? They're probably gonna say no, because,
Well, luckily, we look at the law and the facts and
Yeah.
not always people's opinions.
Oh, that's good, because it doesn't sound like it could work out so well for,
Yeah.
David, did you want to say
Well, in
something?
actual fact, this would be an administrative review, not a CUP, so special notice. I could approve it. I don't necessarily listen to one person. I
Right.
look at the entire issue.
Right.
And so, and then that decision can be appealed to you.
Okay.
So and I thought it was more like, what's the fee for a special notice? $360. So, there you are.
Which is significantly less than the CUP.
Oh, yeah,
But on the-
$3.60.
but at the-
No, 360.
But,
$360.
But-
Oh,
but
that's
also-
outrageous.
But also.
I'm sorry, that's outrageous.
Well, that leads into the comment I was gonna make, which the planning commission, now that they're done with the comprehensive plan update, one of the things they're looking at doing in the near future is looking at all the different uses that require
Review.
various permits from the CUP all the way down to an administrative approval, and seeing what, if they really need that
And that could
particular level of
change,
scrutiny,
Right.
or, if they need should have a lesser level of permit or be
Right.
permitted by right. So that
So
is.
things are on the mend.
That's
Right.
exciting,
Yay. Thank you.
And it's long overdue too, frankly.
yeah.
We're always evaluating and reevaluating. Okay,
Thank you.
so thank you, everyone. Time is now 9:51 a.m., meeting adjourned. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Commissioners.